Well, alright, welcome back to As It Should Be. Paul Bertolino here in the world famous As It Should Be Studios. And today I'm going to be doing something a little special. I decided I wanted to pay tribute to the great city of Los Angeles. Yes, we all know what's happening in LA right now, and it's horrific. And we're everybody's watching helplessly as this unfolds, and when you're watching from afar, it's an especially helpless feeling. But then I guess if you're actually there, it's also a helpless feeling. Yeah. And, I love LA, and there are many people I love in LA, and there are many bands and artists that I love that are from LA. And that brings us to what today's video is. I decided what I wanted to do was count down my top 20 favorite artists, bands from LA. It's mostly bands, but there are one or two artists in there, you know. Yeah, I tend to say bands, but, you know, as sort of a catch-all, but, you know, sometimes it's a solo artist. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. And I might as well get started here because I have 20 artists to talk about, and I don't want this to be a long video, or I don't want it to be an overly long video. Now, I have a runner-up, and there's a simple, basic reason why I have a runner-up, and I will explain. That runner-up is the Partridge Family. Now, the reason why I have the Partridge Family as a runner-up is because I didn't want to include them in the actual list because they're not a real band. You know, I love the Partridge Family, and if they were to be on this list, they would rank very high. Very high. We're talking top 5 high. Yeah. But because the Partridge Family is really just a fictional band, strictly a fictional band made for TV, for a TV show, they're basically TV sitcom characters that were never a band. They were never a touring band, nothing. I disqualified them for that reason, but I decided I wanted to kind of bring them up. So, there you go. But now let's get on to the proper list here. Alright, so coming in at number 20. Coming in at number 20, I have Weyes Blood. Yeah, Weyes Blood. Now, Weyes Blood is more of a modern artist. Well, she's been around for, at least, she put out her first album in 2011. She was born in Santa Monica and, spent her early years there before, around high school, I think her family had moved to Pennsylvania, and then I think she moved to Oregon at some point, and then she moved to New York. She moved all around until she finally went back to LA as a recording artist, recording her albums. She has maybe 5 albums or so that she's put out since 2011. This is the album that I discovered her on, Titanic Rising, and this came out in 2019, and it's to date my favorite Weyes Blood album. She makes really amazing, beautiful, moody, ethereal music, and I've talked about her before, how she has that really nice, deep Karen Carpenter meets Joni Mitchell kind of voice. Really sophisticated stuff. Really cool artist, really cool person, and Weyes Blood is my number 20. All right, so coming to number 19 is a band I don't actually have a record for. I don't think they have any vinyl, actually. Only CDs, and I don't have any of those CDs here, but that band is The Wondermints. Yeah, The Wondermints. Okay, now, these guys were formed in LA in the early 90s, around 92, I guess. By 95, they were starting to release albums, and they really only have, I think, 4 albums that they put out between 95 and 2002. My favorite of them being the last album they did, which was Mind If We Make Love to You. Desperately in need of a vinyl issue. But yeah, around 1999, they became Brian Wilson's backing band, and some of those members have continued to be in his band, others haven't. Some have been on again, off again, but a great, great, great band. Obviously a very Beach Boys influenced band, but it isn't just that. There's so much more to them than that. They have just such great sounding records, great songs, great singing, and just really kind of cool, obviously 60s influences abounding. I really, really recommend checking out their records if you don't know them. The Wondermints, you may have heard of them. If you haven't listened to them, please listen to them, because you know what? I have them on my top 20 list of all-time greatest LA bands. So there you go. That tells you what you need to know, right? All right, coming to number 18, the Muffs. Yeah, the Muffs. All right, so the Muffs formed in LA. I'm going to be saying this a lot. Formed in LA, like all these bands pretty much. But yeah, in the early 90s, around 1991, Kim Shattuck, formerly of the Pandoras, formed this band, basically like a punk, maybe kind of pop punk band, melodic punk band. As the singer-songwriter of the band, as the front person, she brought in Ronnie Barnett, her ex-boyfriend, who played bass, Melanie Bamman also on guitar, Chris Crass on drums, and they, were playing around LA for a couple years, putting out indie singles and all that. And then by 93, had their first album out, their great debut album, self-titled, The Muffs, came out in 1993, right? And now, that's kind of around the time I heard of them. The Muffs were Red Cross adjacent, in various respects. And it was through that connection and my friend Sean McNeely, who was really into he was always up on what all the new bands were, and he was the one who introduced me to the Muffs. And I went with him to go see them after the first album came out, by which time Chris Crass was out, and my friend Jim, shout out to Jim Laspisa, was also in the band by that point. And but ultimately, by their second album, the band settled on what became the final lineup, the classic lineup, which would be Kim, Ronnie, and Roy McDonald, who had previously been in Red Cross. He was now the drummer, and it was a power trio. And that is really the band that, was in existence throughout pretty much most of the life of the band, until they finally broke up in 2019 with the death of the great Kim Shattuck. No Kim, no Muffs, obviously, so the Muffs are no more. Kim, of course, writing all these great melodic 60s pop inspired songs, and of course that great scream that she had, and Ronnie holding things down with his bass playing, and leaping about the stage and spitting at everybody, because the dude's punk as fuck. And Roy, Keith Moonish kind of drummer, and they just had this great chemistry, and they had such a big sound for just one guitar, one bass, and one set of drums. How did they do it? How did they do it? Well, they did it by being fucking awesome. Yeah, they were awesome. The Muffs, coming in at number 18. Right, coming in number 17 is a band that is probably not going to be on a lot of people's lists, but it's on my list. And I don't have an actual record here. I have them in the world famous SHB archives, but no albums by this band here. A very short-lived band, really, all things considered. Bread. Yeah, that's right, I have Bread. I have fucking Bread at number 17 on my list. Now, Bread was formed in LA, of course, in 1968. Their debut album came out in 1969. They were one of those bands that was on Elektra. Elektra was there were a lot of Elektra bands in LA, I think, in the 60s, and Bread was one of them. And, they really lasted from, first album in 69, they only lasted till 73 before breaking up. All kinds of turmoil between David Gates and James Griffin, who was the other songwriter. The thing is James Griffin kind of wrote more of the upbeat kind of stuff, and David Gates wrote a lot more of the ballady stuff, and all that ballady stuff became hits. They had one huge ballad hit after another in the early 70s. I mean, monstrous, huge singles, and poor old James Griffin couldn't possibly get a leg up. He was in the shadow of old David Gates, and that created a lot of tension that ultimately led to their breakup in 73. They reunited in 76, for 76, 77, and they put out one album, and then it all exploded again, and that was it. It was all over. But for just that little brief period of time, I mean, these guys were massive. Like, Bread was huge. Yeah, Best of Bread alone, like side one of Best of Bread, I mean, Make It With You, Everything I Own, Diary, Baby I'ma Want You, It Don't Matter to Me, If. I mean, these guys had incredible hits, and incredible, just giant hits, like you couldn't really even escape at the time for a brief period of time. And then suddenly, poof, they were very easy to escape suddenly. Unfortunately. And, Bread always seems to be, they're considered a pretty uncool band, I think. Definitely back when I was growing up, they were considered incredibly uncool. In fact, I thought they were uncool as a little kid because my mom was listening to them. My mom listened to Bread. My aunt, everybody had Best of Bread, and everybody used to play Best of Bread, and I hated it. But there just came this time where all of a sudden the tide kind of changed, and I started really loving it. I think there was a certain amount of nostalgia that I started to attach to these songs. And yeah, by the time I was in my 20s, I just absolutely loved Bread, and I love Bread now. And now at this point, I've gone into where I actually have all the albums, and I've gone in and listened to all the deep cuts and everything. And, there's some tracks I don't like, but man, there are a lot of great, great tracks. Bread was a really underrated band, and yeah, I have them at number 17. All right, number 16. Coming in number 16, War. War. I love War. Man, I love War. Okay, now these guys are from Long Beach, California. They were kind of brought together, or I don't know, kind of plucked out of a club, I guess, one day to become a backing band for Eric Burdon, really. And it became Eric Burdon and War, and they put out a couple of albums, had a big hit with Spill the Wine. But when they were touring for their second album, Eric Burdon had some sort of asthma issues and took ill and ended up basically leaving the band, and War just continued. They just continued as War. And honestly, that's when things really got good. Once they were rid of that Eric Burdon guy, that's when things really got good. I mean, they put out initially in 70, 71, they put out a self-titled debut, which is pretty good. But this second album, All Day Music, oh man. Such an incredible album. The title track, All Day Music, Slipping into Darkness. But I mean, what else is on here? Get Down, Nappy Head. Yeah, oh man. Yeah, such incredible stuff on here. But, they have World is a Ghetto, and Why Can't We Be Friends, and Deliver the Word, and Platinum Jazz, and on and on and on and on and on. So many great albums and so many great songs. Their great 1976 single, Summer. Not on an album, it's on the Greatest Hits album, but Summer is... yeah. I really love War. They're really an underrated band, and they're such a distinct sounding band. They're one of those bands that you can say maybe certain guitar players, a certain keyboard players, certain musicians that they can pluck one or two notes and you know who's playing. War, just as a band, if they can collectively as a band hit one note, you'd be like, oh, that's War. That's War. Absolutely. Yeah, I really love those guys. And yeah, they come in at number 16. All right, so coming in number 15, Buffalo Springfield. Oh, man. You had to have known this band was coming up. Yeah, Buffalo Springfield. This is their second album, Buffalo Springfield again, which is probably my favorite of theirs. Now, Buffalo Springfield, I mentioned how Bread was a short-lived band. Buffalo Springfield was an incredibly short-lived band and made such an impact in such a short amount of time. I'm going to put my glasses on because I have these notes here. I kind of want to give you a little something here. Now, these guys were formed in LA, of course, on April 6, 1966, okay? April 6, 1966. 5 days later, on April 11th, they played their first gig at the Troubadour. Okay? Then, just a few days after that, they went on tour with the Byrds. Then, in May and June of the same year, we're talking like the following month, they got a residency at the Whiskey, then signed to ADCO and released their first album in October. Formed in April of 66, first album came out in October of 66. They put out their second album in 67, and then they broke up in 1968. So, I mean, you think about how anybody who's been in a band, played gigs, gig after gig, year after year, and you think, man, we're going to make it someday. And I just think of some of these bands, like Buffalo Springfield, who literally formed, and within days were playing the Troubadour, went on tour, and within a couple months had an album out. That's just so insane. Absolutely insane. But they made such a huge impact. I mean, obviously we have Neil Young, we have Steve Stills, we have Richie Furay, and, Jim Messina ultimately joined the band. And, For What It's Worth, Rock and Roll Woman, Bluebird, so many great songs. Expecting to Fly. Yeah, and they did so much in such little time, and yeah, totally deserving a place on my list. Number 15, Buffalo Springfield. All right, number 14, coming in number 14, The Fifth Dimension. Oh man, how I love The Fifth Dimension. Love them. Yeah, this is the only Fifth Dimension album I have handy, but I do have them all. What's my favorite Fifth Dimension album? It might be The Magic Garden. I love The Magic Garden. But I have this one here, so that's the one I'm showing. Now, they formed in LA, of course, in 1965 as the Versatiles. And they tried auditioning for Berry Gordy, trying to get on Motown, and he turned him down. Oh, Berry Gordy, what do you know? And, well, they ended up getting signed, by Johnny Rivers. Johnny Rivers had a label called Soul City, and Johnny Rivers signed them and started putting out their records, and they became a success right away, right out of the gate with their first album. I don't think the first single was big, but, the second single they released off that first album was Up, Up, and Away. Yeah, Up, Up, and Away. I mean, what a song. I mean, they have so many great singles. Probably, a lot of you music dorks out there, you know all this stuff, but there may be some people who don't really know all the songs that, Up, Up, and Away, Stone Soul Picnic, which of course is a Laura Nyro song, California Soul, Aquarius Let the Sunshine In, which of course you've heard a million times, Wedding Bell Blues, One Less Bell to Answer, Last Night I Didn't Get to Sleep at All. Oh man, so many incredible songs, and a lot of great deep cuts too. I mean, if you like that kind of, just soulful, but almost soulful sort of sunshine pop. It's like soulful sunshine pop. Amazing stuff. Dig deeper into The Fifth Dimension because you deserve it. All right, coming in number 13, The Runaways. Yeah, The Runaways. Ah, man. Now, The Runaways, they were formed in 1975 by Kim Fowley. He put them together. He was the Svengali who put them together, as pretty much everybody knows, I believe. But the original version of that band was a power trio. He had Joan Jett and he had Sandy West, but they also had Michael Steele, later of the Bangles. She was the bass player and the singer. That was the initial version of the band. And that, busted up, and one or two other people came and went, and they had hit on the final classic lineup that included Cherie Currie and Jackie Fox and Lita Ford, of course. And they only lasted until late 78, early 79, and made 4 albums? 2, 3, 4 albums. And then they ended up busting up because Joan Jett and Lita Ford couldn't decide where they wanted to go. Joan Jett wanted to get more punk, Lita Ford wanted to be more metal, and neither of them could possibly bend at all on this, which doesn't make any sense to me. Come on, guys. Maybe do both, or maybe combine those two musical genres and come up with your own Runaways rock. I don't know. I mean, whatever. But they were kids, and they didn't know. Whatever. They were young, and they'd already been through plenty, having to deal with Kim Fowley. I think they probably were looking for an excuse to get away from each other and go do their own thing, and that they did. But what a great band they were. I mean, really, they started out a little bit rough, but they just really, they worked at it and became a machine. I mean, listen to that Runaways Live in Japan album. I mean, they sound absolutely incredible. I mean, they just were this badass hard rock band that was not to be denied. It being the late 70s, a lot of people were trying to deny them, but they could not, try as they might. Yeah, the Runaways, man. Number 13. All right, coming to number 12, Love. Ooh. Now, Love has a bit of a long history. I feel like there really only are 3 proper Love albums, being the first 3. And then anything after that is really just Arthur Lee with a bunch of other randos recording an Arthur Lee album under the name of Love. But yeah, those first 3 albums, that's really where my heart lies with Love. I have all the other albums. I mean, I bought For Sale, and I have Out Here, and what is False Start and Reel to Reel, and even I think Arthur Lee did an album in 1980 or something. All this crazy stuff. Oh, well, there's Arthur Lee Vindicator solo album 72, and then there's all the Lost albums that have come out in recent years. But it's really this original band version of Love that really made all the impact, and it just has so many great songs. And they originally formed in 1965 in LA. Surprise, surprise. They were called the Grassroots. Yeah, they were the Grassroots for like a little while, but then of course some other band called the Grassroots came out, and I think they're probably having a little bit more success, and Arthur Lee went, all right, well, we'll change our name to Love. And you know what? Arthur Lee wins, because Love's a way better name anyway, and Love's a way better band, too. That is why they're on my list, and the Grassroots are not. Yeah, Love. And, Love never really broke through, really. I mean, they didn't have any major hits. Maybe 7 and 7 Is, My Little Red Book would be the only tracks that your average person might know, but those weren't even really big hits. The thing is that Love never really became a big band because they never toured. Arthur Lee was really against touring. He didn't want to travel. He didn't like to. Yeah, I don't think he liked flying, and he just basically stayed in L.A. And as a result, Love really kind of was always a cult band, but they were huge in L.A. and they were incredible. Man, Arthur Lee, what a absolutely insane, crazy genius he was, and yeah, deserves a place on my list. Number 12, Love. All right, coming to number 11, The Byrds. Yeah, The Byrds. Okay, yeah, I don't have any vinyl of The Byrds here. All my Byrds records are in the world famous SHB archives, so I'm not showing anything. But man, The Byrds. They were formed in LA. Can you say it all with me? In 1964, and they were basically combining Beatles' British Invasion with folk, essentially inventing folk rock, which became a huge thing in 1965, and the Byrds became a huge band in 1965. They put out 2 albums. They put out Mr. Tambourine Man and Turn, Turn, Turn in 65. Yeah, obviously, they were having huge hits covering Bob Dylan, Mr. Tambourine Man being the greatest example, but, I mean, they were also great songwriters in their own right. David Crosby, Gene Clark. I mean, and their harmonies, their incredible harmonies, and of course they started the whole jangle guitar pop thing. They really, a lot came out of what they did. I mean, they were one of those bands that really, one of the most influential bands of the 60s, really, and to this day, there are bands that are based on really what those guys did. I mean, because then once they started to splinter and David Crosby was out and people started leaving the band, Gene Clark was already out, they kind of became like an alternative country band, an alt country band, kind of country rock. They were one of the earliest bands to do that. Like they blazed a lot of trails, the Byrds, and had a lot of incredible albums and a lot of incredible songs. And number 11, the Byrds. All right, coming to number 10, the Turtles. Yeah, the Turtles. Now, the Turtles, man. Now, they were originally an instrumental surf band. They formed, they were around the early 60s, maybe around 63, 64. And, they were the Night Riders, then they were the Crossfires, and Mark Volman and Howard Kaylan were the saxophone guys. There were no vocals. They were the sax guys. But what happened is they ended up getting signed to White Whale. White Whale, the label, formed in 1965 and signed them, and they became a different animal. They decided to go pop rock and ditch the saxes, and Mark Volman and Howard Kaylan became the singers. And you want to talk about great vocals? I was just talking about great vocals with the Byrds. Man, you want to talk about the great vocals? Howard Kaylan, Mark Volman, the Turtles. Oh man, great songs. Obviously. Happy Together, and She'd Rather Be With Me, and God, what else? Eleanor, and You Showed Me, which was originally a Byrds song from their early days. I mean, such incredible stuff. You, baby. Man, the Turtles was such an underrated group, and I really, really wish that they hadn't splintered when they had, because they broke up not long after this album came out in 1969. They actually started on a follow-up that they didn't finish, but at some point, maybe in the 80s, I guess, maybe they released it called Shell Shocked. They put what there was of the album out. And man, it was so good. It was going to be better than this. What they already have is better than this. I mean, I really would have loved to have seen them go on. But what we did get from them, I mean, such incredible stuff. I mean, the Battle of the Bands album, the Happy Together album. Yeah, I mean, really, they're not. I wouldn't say they're an overlooked band. I feel like people just only look at their singles, though. They have so many great deep cuts. You really need to dig into their albums. They have such great stuff. Now, this album, it's signed by Howard Kaylan, and the reason why I'm pointing that out to you is because it's also signed. Well, now, Henry Diltz took this photo. Henry Diltz, photographer, great photographer in LA, who worked a lot with the Monkees and the Turtles and all those bands. He took this photograph, and I had him sign it. You can barely see it. It's right there. Now, he was really queasy about signing my record. He seemed to be really kind of modest about it, and he almost was acting like I was telling him to deface my record. And it's like, no. Dude, sign the record. This is your work too. And he did sign it, but he made sure to he got a brown pen and made sure he buried it in there as much as he could. But he signed the record. But is this my favorite Turtles album? Yeah, maybe it's a tie between this and the Happy Together album. The Happy Together album has some great deep cuts on it. I'm trying to riff here on the Turtles, and I'm not doing a very good job. Yeah, well, you know what? The Turtles, they come in at number 10. Deal with it. All right, coming in at number 9. The Mamas and the Papas. Yeah, well, you knew this was coming because it's in the thumbnail, right? So you knew these guys were coming up. But you also knew they were coming up because they're a great, great band, and they deserve to be on the list. Yeah, and, oh, man, this is their debut album, if you can believe your eyes and ears. And, well, let's see. They were formed in New York City, actually. They were initially formed in New York City, but they ended up making their way over to LA, and that's really where things kind of started to happen. But initially it was just John and Michelle Phillips kind of put it together, and they brought in Cass Elliot and Denny Doherty, who had been in a band in a folk group called the Mugwumps. But they went to LA, and their buddy Barry McGuire, who had a big, huge hit at the time with The Eve of Destruction. Yeah, he introduced them to Lou Adler, who signed them to Dunhill, and then by February 1966, they put out this album. And, whew, man, I mean, this album has Monday, California Dreamin'. What else? There's more than that. I can't read it because I don't have my glasses. Yeah, Go Where You Wanna Go's on this. Yeah, such great stuff. But, great deep cuts like Straight Shooter and Got a Feeling and, Somebody Groovy. Great deep cut. Yeah. Love the Mamas and Papas, but they were another one of those really short-lived groups. I mean, because a lot of these bands were really dysfunctional and were just living the life and just doing crazy-ass shit and self-destructing within a matter of, months, maybe a couple of years. Mamas and Papas, what did they last till maybe 1968? They put out 4 albums, completely imploded, and then they had to get back together in 1971 to do one more album, like a Contractual Obligation album, which sounds like a Contractual Obligation album, but other than that, that's it. I mean, and again, like a lot of these bands, they made such an impact. I mean, that's such timeless classic singles and incredible albums. And again, the vocals, the harmonies, Cass Elliot, Mama Cass, incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. John Phillips didn't want her in the band, for certain aesthetic reasons, but he was wrong, and I'm sure he quickly found out that he was wrong. Because really, I mean, in the end, she was the biggest star in the band. When they broke up, she was the one who became a solo star. And yeah, there you go. I mean, the Mamas and the Papas, they still pack a punch. I have them at number 9. All right, coming to number 8. The Association. Oh man, The Association. Love them. Love them. Oh man. And this is my favorite Association album, Birthday. Yeah. I mean, they kind of have a big three. So a lot of bands have a big three. Association have a big three: Inside Out, Birthday, and the self-titled album from 1969. Well, the Association was formed out of what had initially been a 13-piece folk band called The Men. It was a really short-lived band that ended up breaking up, and 6 of those 13 guys sort of broke away and formed the Association. And initially they signed to a little label called Valiant, right? And had a couple albums, but, and a couple of initial really huge hits like Along Comes Mary, Cherish. Anybody? Yeah, and they were pretty much a success right out of the gate, right with their first album. Not necessarily the first single, but definitely with their first album. And Jules Alexander, who'd been one of the founders, he ended up leaving after a couple albums, and they brought in Larry Ramus, who had previously been in the New Christy Minstrels, and man, things went to the next level. I mean, then they had Windy. He's the lead singer on Windy. They had Never My Love, and just all kinds of incredible singles and all kinds of incredible albums. Oh, man. The Association is definitely one of those bands that really, I feel, is just so overlooked. I think probably because a lot of people probably don't think they're cool, but anybody who doesn't think the Association is cool isn't cool. That's right, I have them at number 8, the Association. Right, coming in number 7, Mark Erich. Yeah, Mark Erich. I know you're surprised because you're probably thinking Mark Erich should be higher on the list. I agree. Yeah, he should be higher. I almost put him higher, but I mean, man, there's some heavy-duty stuff higher on the list. Mark Erich is an absolute favorite of mine. Now, a lot of people watching this don't even know who I'm talking about. You're going, Mark Erich, what the fuck are you talking about? Mark Erich. Okay. Well, I have notes here. I want to read this because because I'm gonna mess it up if I try to go off the top of my head. The great Mark Erich. Now he's from Santa Monica, California. He's your stereotypical blonde Southern California guy. He recorded this one incredibly gorgeous record in the spring of 1969, a masterpiece, recorded, I would say 3 to 4 years too late. In a nutshell, he sounds like. Well, I said this on a previous video where I was talking about, I feel like his voice is sort of akin to Bob Welch. He's like a cross between Bob Welch and Brian Wilson, vocally, strangely. And, but it sounds like Bob Welch / Brian Wilson fronting the Beach Boys. His music is very Beach Boys influenced. But it isn't just a copy of the Beach Boys. He really has his own flavor in there. He has his own sort of... Yeah, he kind of has his own style within the Beach Boys kind of esque sort of thing. But now, as this album came out on a little label called Review, sank without a trace, nobody bought it, there are hardly any copies out there, and that was that. Like, his music career was over, but he had other things he was doing. He was a model, and he was an actor, and at the dawn of the 70s, he ended up going into acting, and he appears on TV. There are actually TV shows that you probably saw him in. He was in The Partridge Family, Room 222, Hawaii Five-0. He was in a handful of movies, Call Her Mom, Pretty Maids All in a Row. He was in that. Now, have you ever seen the episode of The Partridge Family where Rob Reiner plays Snake, and he takes Lori to the prom, and a couple of dickheads come up to give Rob Reiner's character a really hard time? Well, one of those guys is Mark Erich, and yeah, this record is just these beautiful orchestral pop. Incredible arrangements, just incredible songs, and this is one of my favorite albums of all time. If you love Beach Boys, this kind of stuff, if you love orchestral pop, if you like, just really, if you like beautiful music, listen to this record, Mark Erich, A Midsummer's Day's Dream, and all I gotta say about that. All right, coming number 6. Red Cross. Like you didn't know that was coming. Anybody who watches my videos, anybody who knows me at all, knew Red Cross was going to be on this list. The only surprise here probably is that they're not at number 1. And I'll tell you something. I almost put them at number 1. They were kind of, yeah, I mean, I was really flirting with putting them at number 1. In the end, I put them at number 6. Again, there's some really heavy-duty stuff coming up on the list that I had to put them higher. But Red Cross, in some ways, Red Cross is number 1 on the list. Spiritually, they're on the list. Spiritually, they are number 1 on the list. But, okay. I mean, I've talked about them so much before, but, you know, they were formed in 1978 in Hawthorne, California. 2 very young brothers, Jeff and Steve McDonald. They formed this band, this punk band, basically. They were the first kiddie punk band, in their own words. But they were always sort of this influential underground band that never really made it big. And they went through years and years, lineup change after lineup change, style change after style change. Every Red Cross album is, up to a certain point, pretty much most Red Cross albums are radically different from any other Red Cross album. Like, if you go to their first 4 or 5 records, every single record is completely different from any of the other ones. And they have influenced countless bands that you love, but never really enjoyed the kind of success that a lot of those bands have enjoyed. Well, as we all know, anybody who's watching my channel, this of course is the year of Red Cross, because they have their latest album, the self-titled double album. They have a documentary out called Born Innocent. They have a book out, their biography, Now You're One of Us, The Incredible Story of Red Cross. Anybody who's going, okay, what is with this Red Cross Paul keeps talking about? Well, there's all kind of stuff out there now. You need to go see the documentary. You need to read the book. You need to listen to the albums. And yeah, I mean, Red Cross is definitely one of my favorite bands of all time. And like I said, in a way, they're kind of number 1 on the list, but there's my top 5 to consider here, and I just had to bump them down. And well, it's because coming to number 5, I have that other band from Hawthorne, the Beach Boys. yeah, the Beach Boys. Yeah, I was thinking, do I put Red Cross above the Beach Boys? Do I put the Beach Boys above Red Cross? How do I do this? In the end, I had to put the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys have a lot of albums that I don't like much, but they have a lot of albums that I love. This one, obviously, but so many incredible songs. God, Mike, do I even need to bother to sit here and list them all? Now, the Beach Boys also can be polarizing. A lot of people, basically, you either love the Beach Boys or you can't stand them. I'm finding, and I used to dislike them. I used to dislike the Beach Boys. I used to find them hokey when I was younger, but I grew into them. It's because when I was a kid growing up in the 70s, they were just, they were TV commercial music. Good Vibrations was a Sunkist commercial and all that kind of stuff, and I've said this before on previous videos talking about them. But thankfully I found my way with them, and yeah, I have them at number 5, the Beach Boys. Okay, so coming to number 4, above the Beach Boys and above Red Cross, the Carpenters. Yeah. I love the Carpenters so much. Love them. Oh, man. And this is my favorite Carpenters album. I mean, what is there to say about the Carpenters? From down in California, the Carpenters. And, all kinds of incredible music. More than meets the eye. People just think, oh, Carpenters, these sugary, goody ballads, because they came out at a time when you had Black Sabbath and you had Led Zeppelin, and they seemed pretty I think to a lot of people, they just seem just kind of hokey. Carpenters are not hokey. The Carpenters had just such incredible stuff. Really incredible, beautiful songs, but a real dark undercurrent. And one of the greatest vocalists of all time, Karen Carpenter. Yeah. I can't really overstate my love for the Carpenters. And if you like the Carpenters at all, meaning like if you have any fondness for those singles, but you've never dug into the albums, you should dig into the albums. There's some really, really amazing stuff on these records. Some dorky stuff too. Some of the stuff actually is hokey. A lot of it is really great though. And I cannot love the Carpenters enough. Number four, the Carpenters. All right, coming to number 3. Another band that I almost put at number 1. But they got knocked down to number 3. Well, I almost put them at number 1. Then they got knocked down to number 2 when I came to my senses and realized my number 1. But then I had to put them down to number 3. But man, I'm telling you, they were almost number 1. Van Halen. Yeah, fuck, man, Van Halen. Man, there's a hard, good case to be made for the Van Halen to be the best album the best band from LA ever. But yeah, they're from Pasadena, California. Well, the Van Halens, Eddie and Alex, they're actually Dutch. They're from Amsterdam, but their family moved to Pasadena when they were very young, and so it's an LA band because it was formed in LA. It's not a Dutch band, but yeah. Van Halen. What do I need to say about Van Halen? I'm okay now. I'm a Dave guy. I guess I can say that. I'm a Dave guy. I'm not into Sammy Hagar era. Obviously, I'm not into the Van Halen 3 era. It's all Dave all night for me. But that's really the heart and soul of what Van Halen really, really was to me. And it's just, it became a different band after that. Everything about it just completely changed. And even if you like that stuff that came after Dave, it's just a whole different thing. It isn't just Sammy that I don't think Sammy even changed it himself. Eddie changed it. Like Eddie completely went into a different place musically, and a place that I think they would have gone to with Dave, though, if you want to be real. But I don't know. But you take Dave out of it and you put Sammy in, and it's just a different band. It's just a different band. So when I say Van Halen, I mean Van Halen. Okay? But, yeah. So, Van Halen, number 3. Alright, it's coming to number 2. The band that knocked Van Halen down to number 3. Yeah. Man. I had to really think about it. But in the end, I had to put it number 2. The Doors. Oh, man, The Doors. Now, I'm trying to think of which band I got into earlier. I feel like I got into them pretty close to the same time. I almost want to say I was into Van Halen before I was into The Doors. But I got into The Doors also kind of around the same time. The thing is that when I was around 12... I think it was maybe when I first started getting into The Doors, I became interested, maybe 12, 13. My Uncle Rick died. He died at a very young age. He died around, he was 30. And I inherited his records. And in his collection, he had the Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine double comp album that came out in, 72? And that was kind of my introduction to The Doors. I was aware of them, and, I knew certain songs, but that was my first time really digging in past what I had heard on the radio. And that's really what started my whole thing with The Doors. And, then I got the book, No One Here Gets Out Alive, and, when you're like 13, 14 years old, reading a book like that, it's just really gonna... Yeah, it's just, it's really just going to bring The Doors home to you. And I just got so heavily into The Doors. And the Doors will always be, sometimes I think maybe I'm a little tired of The Doors because over the years, and they became such a classic rock staple and all this kind of stuff. But not in the end, I will always love the Doors. They the thing is that they've become such a staple of classic rock that they threaten to. It's almost like Led Zeppelin. Like, you could really get really sick of them because of it. But man, I don't know, man. I can't get rid of. I can't get sick of the Doors. Can't get rid of the Doors either. But I can't get sick of them. I just they're always deep in here for me. Number 2, the Doors. All right, so coming in number 1. I mean, this is why I couldn't put Red Cross or Van Halen at number 1. Because there was no way. There was no way I wasn't going to have it number 1. The Monkees. Yeah. The Monkees. I mean, yeah. Now, at the top of this video, I spoke about the Partridge Family and how I disqualified them because they were merely a fictional TV band. And you're going, and you have the Monkees on the list at number 1? Yes, because the Monkees were originally conceived as a fictional TV band, brought together and intended to be nothing more than a fictional TV band. But the Monkees themselves would not allow that to be, and they became a real band. They became a real band. They were all musicians, they were all singers, and, the Partridge Family were really all actors. I mean, David Cassidy was the only musician in the band. He and Shirley Jones were the only vocalists, but Shirley wasn't even on the records. I mean, those are really David Cassidy singing on TV soundtracks. The Monkees really ultimately became a real band, and yeah, there's no way I couldn't put them on the list, or no way I wouldn't put them on the list, and there's no way they wouldn't be number 1. I mean, I'm talking about the Doors being forever in my heart. The Monkees, are you kidding me? I mean, that runs so deep. I mean, they're one of the earliest bands, one of my earliest bands that I loved in my life. Obviously, it all began with the Beatles, but it didn't take very long from there for the Monkees to take hold. I mean, there was the TV show that was in reruns, so there was that, and there was this particular album. I mean, this album was my introduction to the Monkees as an album-making entity, and they just, yeah, I mean, I grew up, I grew up loving the Monkees kind of as much as the Beatles, actually, and to some that would be blasphemy, but you want to call a cop? I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, number 1, the Monkees. All right, so there you go. That is my top 20 favorite bands from LA. And again, in tribute to the great city of Los Angeles, my heart goes out to everybody who's dealing with these fires and all the homes that had been lost, and all my friends out there. I really, it's horrific, and I don't even know what to say. But yeah, so I'm gonna end it here, and what do I want to say? Oh, I want to say that you probably should come back on Thursday. Come back on Thursday, because Crystal Durant and Tommy Von Voigt are going to be here, and we're going to be discussing our favorite live albums of 1976. Yes, our live albums series continues. Come back for that. Salute to LA, salute to you for watching, and I hopefully will see you soon.